there are many forms of mental illness. You have, obviously, people with depression. You have names for them: schizophrenia, bipolar, ADD. But a lot of people don't put substance abuse in that category also, and it is a mental illness, and that's something we're going to be talking about today. We have a great guest today. He's the creator and executive producer of a show on A&E on Saturdays at 1 p.m. So we're going to get to him in a second, but I want to first thank our sponsors. We have Clarity Health Solutions, we have Beacon Restoration, and we have Business Services for You. So today I just want to get right to it, and we have a couple of co-hosts in here today with me. We have, obviously, as always, Jennifer Hoskins-Tomko from Clarity Health Solutions.
Hi, Alan.
How you doing? We have Mark Astor from Drug and Alcohol Attorneys.
Yeah, good to be back, and you pronounced it right. You got it right.
Yeah, I'm getting it.
It's all right. It's a mouthful.
I'm getting good. But today the special guest is Stuart Goffman, and did I say that right?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Stuart is the executive producer and the creator of a fantastic show, and I've seen all the episodes so far on A&E channel. Stuart, it's a great show. It's about hope. It's about getting people hope. Just tell us a little bit, how did you get into this, and why are you doing this show?
Sure. So when I used to have a treatment center in Fort Lauderdale, and I was outside of the world of addiction, and I thought my experience would be different. I thought it was going to be tough. It's going to be the clients are going to be tough, and in the end, they're sweet kids.
Yeah.
We did a lot of 18 to 25, 30-year-old kids, and one-on-one, they're nice kids. And I dealt with their parents. I dealt with their relatives, and everybody had the same complaint. It's difficult enough to deal with the addiction,
right?
But you also have to deal with this stigma and shame.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to get into.
Yeah.
So just like mental health, just like mental illness, and it is a mental illness, there's a huge stigma that goes behind it, and anybody that basically is an addict, which, you have that stigma behind it that, they're just a failure, they're this, they're that, they're never going to be good. But that's not the case. They're all real human beings that could really accomplish something in life. They just need help.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, mental illness, it's like the chicken or the egg. Is it mental illness that brought on the substance abuse, or the other way?
Right.
And listen, when I was growing up, I was not a drug, taker. And so I thought that, they made their own bed. If you're an addict, you have to sleep in it. And when you get into the business and you understand what's going on, they're not bad people, at all. They are dealing with trauma, or sexual trauma, or something.
So what I love about your show, and it's extremely well put together.
Thank you.
I have to say that. But it is all about hope. You're trying to go out there and show people that it's not the end of the world, that there are people out there that care, and there is a way to go about it. So in saying that, your first show was really interesting. The first one that you had, and it was about how drug pharmacies, pharmaceutical companies, really pushed the drugs on the doctors and sometimes gave wrong information. I know there's a case going on right now. I don't want to get into it, but tell us a little bit about how that first show came about.
Well, Ohio is the epicenter of the whole epidemic. So, we had a contact in Ohio that got us into now it's Governor DeWine.
Mm-hmm.
He was the Attorney General, and actually he was one of the first to sue the pharmaceutical companies.
Okay.
But, it's really bad in Ohio. I'm sure everybody saw these pictures of a couple ODing in their car, and I think the kids were in the back seat.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really bad. And basically, Ohio, you can go to 50% of the U.S. population within 8 hours. So there's a lot of big corporations there for, consumer products, but also the drugs. They mimic the distribution of consumer products.
Yeah,
interesting.
And it is really interesting. And when I look at substance abuse, and again, I'm not an expert. I personally never had an addiction to alcohol or drugs. But, when you look at it, there is a correlation to mental health. And I saw some statistics. I think it was mental health, people that have depression, I think 60%, or it was a very high number that use also alcohol and drugs. I'm looking at something here. There's actually something called alcohol use disorder, which I was reading a little bit about too. So it goes hand in hand. Also, suicide goes hand in hand with that too. And a lot of times I feel that, when people are using, sometimes it's a cry out for help that, they're trying, maybe they don't want to live. And there was a person on your show, if we could talk about it, if that's okay,
Absolutely.
that I was really interested in. He lost his life. He was basically dead 4 times, he said. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, his name is Chris. He was a professional musician in Austin, and he didn't know that he had a disease. And I think he said he OD'd 4 times.
Right, and his heart stopped 4 times.
Yeah, and he said, I was not fearing death. I just don't want to live like this, so miserable. And he basically said, I couldn't stay dead. But when I worked with my clients back when I had the treatment center, I don't know if I've ever seen a addict that says I would never decide to do suicide. They always thought about that. That's part of mental illness, substance abuse, and suicide. I think it's in the same ecosystem.
Yeah, and again, it's hard for me to talk about this because I never had these inclinations to do certain things. There was another gentleman who was talking about I guess they were saying about digging a hole. The parents wanted to put him in a hole, or the family did. They didn't know what to do with him, so they were just trying any way to keep him away from it. He finally agreed to go into treatment.
Well,
was that the Recovery Unplugged one?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he went to I think 3 treatment centers, and Jenna, you can verify this. I think that treatment centers, even if you don't get sober right away, I think it's cumulative. That you learn a little bit, you relapse, you go back, you learn a little bit, and eventually it's going to be a tipping point.
Absolutely. The statistic I heard on that was it takes people an average of 7 times going through rehab in order to get clean, and even then it's like 7% of the population who are successful for the duration of their lifetimes. So it's really difficult. And another point I wanted to bring up was that when you're talking about mental health with addiction, you can almost predict if somebody is using a substance without it being prescribed, you can predict what substance they're going to use based on their mental health diagnosis. So if that person has depression, they're more likely to abuse things like cocaine or alcohol, things like that, because it's almost like they're medicating. It's self-medication as a way of kind of coming out of that headspace, but obviously we become dependent on it.
It's interesting because I always say to a new client, what's your drug of choice?
Right.
And they would always say, what do you got?
Right.
So they want to be out of their mind, self-medicated, because something happened in their past, whether it's a trauma, sexual trauma, your dad left, your mother, abandoned you, whatever it is. So when people say, well, addicts, they made their bed, you have to sleep in it,
yeah.
I don't care. Well, no one wants to be an addict, and no one wants to be switch places with an addict. They really want to be well.
Absolutely.
And, when they first start, that's why when they go to rehab, they're not open for suggestions. And once, I think Joseph said that on the Music and Recovery episode. He said, once I went there and was willing to, open for suggestions, I got well.
Yeah, and again, we talk about with suicide, it's preventable. Suicide, it's an illness. We can help people with it, and that's what we're working towards. And again, with addiction, that's, preventable also. I mean, people could get help. Just because you have an addiction doesn't mean that, it's over and there's nothing can be done. And that's what I love so much about your show, is it's telling people, this is what you could do. It's showing people that the positives that are going on. These are people that, basically their life was over. They died 4 times. They didn't think anything was going to happen at that point. And these are people that are helping other people.
Absolutely. And again, Alan, I was thinking about on the way up here, what you're doing is unbelievable.
Thank you.
John, on the Leidos episode, the Father's Request.
Yes.
A lot of people, when they lose their son or daughter to addiction, they never recover themselves, and they're not going to speak out, and that's what you're doing. And John was helping other people, and you're helping a lot of people also.
And again, it takes people that lose somebody or have a tragedy to come out and really spread the word. Again, I say I do this a lot because I really care about people and I want to help people, but it's also medication for me.
100%.
It's treatment for me, and if I didn't do this, then I would be seeing Jen a lot, and I'd be paying a lot of money. But still, it's something that this is how people help each other. They take something that happened bad to them, or they saw an injustice, or whatever it is, and they go out there and they try to correct it. So again, what you're doing is phenomenal too. The show premise behind it, if you could go a little bit more into maybe some upcoming episodes, or what you're trying to accomplish with the show.
Sure. So I guess the premise is humanizing addiction and recovery, and that includes mental health. Okay, and it's all about hope. It's about second chances. So what we had one episode that's coming up. Michael Lindell from MyPillow. He was a crackhead for 10 years. For many years. And 10 years ago, he got clean. Actually, his crack dealers in Minnesota all had a intervention. He was up for 14 days in a row. And they all got together and said, man, you have so many great things. Don't die on us.
Wow.
And now he's doing $300 million a year. And he has a platform to help a lot of people. A lot of people in recovery work for him. We just did a episode, or actually we filmed an episode with Jason Williams. He was
a basketball player.
The guy from Rebound.
Yeah, great guy. Now actually Futures in Jupiter owns Rebound, and he's a great guy. And he had an awful trauma growing up. His sister was stabbed 17 times, and then died of AIDS, and he had to raise her kids. He was 17 years old, and actually he, unfortunately had a accident that he killed one of his drivers by accident with a gun.
Wow.
And so, just like you said, now he works at Futures, and he is helping a lot of people. And when you help people, it also helps yourself.
Oh, it does. It most definitely does.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I noticed that when I discovered this really 4 years ago, because for a long time I didn't even like being a lawyer. So it's helped me personally, but we're helping a lot of people. And actually, I think, first of all, if you haven't seen the show, you got to go on and watch it.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
to say it's mind-blowingly good, I think isn't doing a disservice to how good it really is. It's really, really good. And the other thing is, I think one of the things I learned from the show, and the one with the father who had lost his son was, we were in tears watching it. I think a couple of things from that show. First of all, I think you realize it can happen to anybody, and anybody who's walking around thinking, it's not going to affect me, is walking around blinkers. It can affect anybody and everybody. I don't care how much money you have, what color your skin is, what your religious background. It can affect anybody. The second thing I think the show took really, for me, is that there is hope, right? It is a treatable disease if you don't give up on the other person, right? Your loved one, your child, whoever it is. So that's we got that out of the show, and it's really amazing stuff.
And one of the really interesting parts about it, and I love the Recovery Unplugged episode. I love them all. They were all incredible. Obviously, a little more connection with the Recovery Unplugged, and we're going to have Dr. Barry on here in 2 weeks from Recovery Unplugged, and obviously Mark and I and Stuart are all friends with Andrew, and they're just great people. But when it comes to music, I saw on one of the episodes too, it had about the anxiety that goes along with these bands and the way they write music, and they use it almost drugs as a crutch to write inspirational songs, and they think that's the only way they could do it. I don't know if that's a confidence issue. I don't know, but obviously I have a gentleman I spoke with. Hopefully I'll have him on the show. He wants to come on. His name is Reed. He was in a punk rock band. He's in Michigan, and he wrote a book. It's almost like a comic book. It was really interesting, but he was writing from the Ramones on up and how punk music has that kind of stigma to it. Right. And everybody in punk does drugs and whatever. Tell us a little bit about that. Did you get anything out of the show as far as why the anxiety levels are there with?
Well, I think a lot of people, including myself, I have a confident facade, but I think everybody, down deep,
we'll have a little wall.
Yeah, they're like, I wonder if they're going to like it. So obviously when you're a rocker or a musician, not only are you facing a crowd, but this is your baby. And when you're writing something and you're performing, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So it has to be either you're really confident or you have a substance to make you a little bit more confident.
Well, I always compare it to when I worked out. And I say that a lot because, and don't laugh at me again this time because we went over this, but I used to work out don't blame it on my wife.
Workout. It does it to me every morning.
So I used to work out the 6 days a week and, had all this great, whatever in my head thinking I was, God's gift and everything at the time. And, I thought I was indestructible. And that's what it sounds like to me with this, because my confidence level, I had no anxiety. I thought I could go and do anything at that point. It was just from working out. But, I see that. And the nice part about it was when these people did recover and they're helping other people, they found out that they're writing just as great songs as they did when, or even better. I mean, Richie Super's a great example. His music is incredible.
I learned a lot from the Recovery Unplugged episode. They were so, when you're an addict, you have to steal, do whatever you have to do to get the money to get your next fix. And people at Recovery Unplugged in Austin, they do a lot of concerts for people that would never go to a concert. We filmed this. It was like Down syndrome, adults living with Down syndrome. It was a whole campus, and they're not going to go to a live music, so they would bring the music to them, and it was really unbelievable. And one of the guys, I think his name is Kurt. He was a great violin player. He said, we were so bad as addicts that we're doing just the opposite. We want to balance the karma scale, I guess. So, they do a lot. When you're in recovery, they do a lot to help each other and give back to society.
And I wanted to bring up real quick, I work with a lot of folks who are in recovery, and they'll come to me and they'll say, Jen, with almost their tail between their legs, like, Jen, I relapsed. And they're reluctant to tell me because of the shame associated. And I'm like, yeah, it's okay. It's a speed bump. It doesn't have to be, you're not jumping off the end of a cliff. This is just a speed bump. Addiction is part of recovery, and it's not to be shameful about it. It's to be accepting that this is just part of the journey as you continue to grow. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about it, because in your show, that's part of what you're doing, is you're destigmatizing, the idea of like what makes an addict.
It's interesting. So if the judgment was gone and the stigma and the shame was gone, how many more people would go and use Mark's services to go back to treatment? And that's the ultimate goal is, and the same thing with the mental health. If you can go to your friend or a doctor and say, I'm not feeling that well, and you're not going to be judged, maybe a lot of people would get help. And that's why, maybe this mass murders that are going on here, maybe those guys need mental health. Well, obviously they did. And if it wasn't such a black cloud in society, they could have, gone to you.
And
right.
I really appreciate you saying that, because first of all, on the violence that's going on, there have been studies done and to prove that there were signs from these people that might have been suicidal, but anyway, we'll get into that another time. But I appreciate you saying that, because my three pet peeves with this, we could go into a lot of different areas, and you go all over the place to try and figure out what's wrong and how we're going to get people with mental health issues, the help they need. But I think the first thing we got to do is create awareness. People got to understand that it's not the stigma behind it, and it's not a bad thing to help someone that has a mental health issue, because they are going to end a substance abuse, because they are going to get better. They're just regular people like you and me. We all have our crutches. Some of us are chocoholics, some of us are workout-aholics, whatever. But we have
playful.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's always like some kind of addiction that somebody has in some way. So I appreciate that. So it's the awareness, the conversation, to talk to people, and then also the ability to get help when you realize you need the help and you want, and those are the three things I think we need to start with. And we had Congressman Hastings on last week, and again, we're going to create good things with that. But we only have a couple minutes left. Please tell us about the show, what's the airing times, what's coming up, anything. It's a great show. Everybody should watch it.
Thank you. So it's on A&E on Saturdays, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then 1:30. It's two half-hour shows. I think next week is motherhood and addiction.
Oh, wow.
And then the other one is LGBTQ and Q and addiction. They have a hard time also.
Yes.
And then we
I've
have
had very close friends that I think I mentioned to you.
Yes.
That went through that, so it's personal for me too.
Yeah. And then we have Jason Williams' story. We have Michael Lindell, which is the My Pillow.
Okay.
We have Inner City and Addiction, and then First Responders. And you think about
those are great shows.
First responders, they think they see things that no one should see.
Yes.
And little by little, it's like a cumulative trauma.
Mm-hmm. So, I work with a lot of first responders. I'm a trauma specialist, actually.
Okay.
And I have several on my caseload. So yeah, absolutely, it's traumatizing after retirement. Start to have the trauma.
So again, let's, I think we all need to start spreading awareness. Your show is a good way to do it. Don't forget, on Saturdays at 1 p.m. on the A&E channel. And you could also get it on the app, too, right?
Correct.
And it's on demand.
Yeah, and you could also go to addictionunplugged.com.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
So, Stuart, I really appreciate your time here. Again, we have Stuart Goffman. He was the creator and executive producer of a show on A&E, which was called Addiction Unplugged. We have Jennifer Hoskins-Tomko from Clarity Health Solutions here. Thank you so much for coming in.
Always.
Mark G. Astor, I'll put there, from drug and alcohol attorneys. And again, we got to have you on again because your information there is incredible. So again, we have a couple things coming up. We have the Out of the Darkness walks coming up in September. Don't forget about them. You go to afsp.org/Southeast Florida. Get the schedule. September 28th is the one for Palm Beach County and John Prince Park. And have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.
Good job, Al.
All right. We can still let go on the live if you want, but
that's awesome.
Your information is incredible.
Thank you.
And, I think we really need to try and spread the word because I really do love the fact that you're out there looking for people to get help. And it's not one of these conspiracy type shows.
No,
that you see out there. It's not like a Cops where everybody's out there and, you see all the druggies and, that's it. They're people.
We're the first show, I think, that attacks addiction from a hopeful / inspiring place.
Yeah, and one of my big issues is, again, the awareness part of it. It only comes out when a tragedy happens.
Right.
So all of a sudden the tragedy happens, everybody's in grief and everybody is talking about it and CNN has it and everybody has it on their shows. And then after a couple of days it goes away. Yeah. You don't hear about it again. And one of the things that I see a lot of is, so when I give these talks, we have AFSP has More Than Sad, and I do Safe Talk training and do all these trainings. Guess who the people that are showing up? The people that are in that situation right now. Anybody that has a kid that they think is never going to happen to them and they're fine, they never show up. And those are the people that eventually will have that issue.
Well, and the reality is that people tend to not change unless they're faced with some sort of discomfort.
Yeah.
So I think that, it's actually considered a healthy defense mechanism to be inspired by those kinds of tragedies versus getting swept up into it. So I actually like to challenge people to make changes without difficulties because nobody changes if you're in your comfort zone and it's comfortable.
Right.
So I appreciate what you're saying.
It never happens. I mean, everybody that, like I said, I see come out to all these events are the people that have experience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We interviewed Kevin Hines.
Yes.
He jumped off the
Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he said within a millisecond, he said, "What am I doing?" And he broke his back and he lived. And it's an incredible story that he was saved by I think it was like a seal or a sea lion that was underneath him. And he was just, floating until the...
someone came and rescued him.
And he said, now I wanted, when he was, still in the water, he said, I need to survive. So that everybody knows that I didn't want to do this.
Yeah, and there are a lot of those stories. I mentioned before the gentleman who's in the military at the Pentagon, and when 9/11 happened, he was one of the rescuers there, and he had PTSD from that. And he attempted, thank God his brother is in the medical field and was worried about him, and he took opioids. And his brother came and saved him, and now he does the talking, and he's very, he does all the outreaches.
Right.
So these are the type of people that are great, inspiring, but it's got to stretch beyond that. It's got to stretch to the people that haven't been affected yet.
Well, when we did the first responders, there's more suicide in the police officers than killed in the line of duty.
Yep.
That's insane.
Well, again, New York had the statistics and it's personal for me because I have a lot of family at NYPD that I think it was 8 of them this year, 6 of them since June.
Really?
Yeah. So it's very, any kind of stressful job. Attorneys, I was speaking with someone from the the Attorney General's office last week, and obviously the Bar Association mentions how the attorneys again
to have a substance use disorder.
Yeah.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Even the police department, when you're speaking with them, what do the police, the officers do, who do a great job during the day, but to get the release off, they go to the bar afterwards, instead of, going home and, resting and everything, and a lot of them do. And sometimes you can't blame them, because of the stress. They got to get the stress out, but again, there are better alternatives to do instead of, just hitting the bar. I had a next door neighbor up in New York who was a detective with the sheriff's office, and every day after work he would come home and just go in his garage, scream my name out, and I knew that meant that he was over there having a drink.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's always had, so again, that's how they get their stress out. And he had a little bit more than that because he was also a veteran from Lebanon. He was in the Marines. So, again, you get a lot of these things on top of each other, and the stress and the anxiety that go with it.
There's a movement, and it's taking a hold. The police officers, the firemen, now they have, crisis intervention teams.
Mm-hmm.
If you see something really bad, they will go and, debrief you before you go home.
I want to be on that team, actually.
Yeah.
I've been looking into trying to figure out how to do it. But yeah, I think it's imperative because with trauma, the closer to the traumatic experience itself that you're actually treating it, the less likely you're going to have long-term consequences from that trauma.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, again, we could go on forever
Yes.
on this. I mean, it's a subject, but again, the biggest part is to speak out, and that's why I appreciate everything you're doing, because there's no show right now that's out there that's speaking up the way you're speaking up on, especially on TV, for the way you did that. Because I know a lot of shows like the controversy, they like all these, and you present your show in a way that's very classy, very, very humanized, and very hopeful. And I think those are three very important to have in a show like that. And it's not just all about, going out there and watching all the bad things happen.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. And again, I'm very proud of you. People, no, it's really, it's easy to go into your shell when something, a tragic event happens like you. And it's another thing to speak out, but it's another thing that you're on the radio and you're doing something proactive, and when it's all said and done and we're in the ground, you're doing something that people will always remember you.
Well, it was funny because I have a friend. I have a lot of friends, my brother included, that are in TV, radio.
Right.
My brother's a producer and for a radio show, and I have a very close friend of mine that I used to date in college, and she was phenomenal, and we're like brother and sister now. She was on the radio for she's still on 35 years. So I called her up and I asked her, I'm like, thinking about doing this radio show. What do you think? And she was basically said to me, Alan, you're not on it right now. If you get on it and you affect one person out there, that's one person more than if you didn't do this. And that, just solidified my thought of doing it.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's just about me, and we all can make a difference. It's not just about me. I don't want, what you guys are doing are phenomenal. What people out there, I mean, again, I'm going back to Recovery Unplugged, because with Dr. Barry and with all those people there, every one of them had some kind of addiction at one point. And I think some of the, whether they're sober or clean, is that how you put it, clean? In recovery for 18 years or 5 years or whatever, they want to make a difference and get back in, and they're working with that organization. So that's what it's about. That's how we expand and get through all these bad things. And we need more of it, though. We need more people to have that awareness and that humanization to say, hey, whether you have an illness, whether you have a mental health or substance abuse, they're humans, and they made a mistake. You had many mistakes, and they could get help, and it's preventable.
And it's someone's son or daughters, or and that's the bottom line. It's someone's relative, someone that really loves them.
Yeah.
And so it's not just an addict on the street. It's someone that has, people that love them.
Yeah. So I appreciate it. I know you going out to Utah this week. So,
you meeting with
the Attorney General,
which you should have mentioned on the radio.
I know.
He does an unbelievable job.
Yeah.
Actually, can we get that on the radio, Kat? Can we get a little bit?
She's like, you went 20 minutes over. Where am I going to put that?
I didn't go 20 minutes over.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, but there's a lot of space in there you're going to cut out. Not this whole part, just the part about him working with the Attorney General.
No, we're done.